You ever notice how every major shop disaster starts with a tiny, innocent-looking spark? It's never a bolt of lightning. It's a little blue flicker behind a workbench that makes you think, I'll deal with that after this glue up dries.
Spoken like a man who has definitely seen a little blue flicker and ignored it. Is that why the corner of your assembly table has a char mark that looks suspiciously like the state of Ohio?
That's a beauty mark, Alex. But yeah, electricity is the only thing in the shop that'll bite you without making a sound first. Wood screams when you cut it wrong. Metal throws a fit. But a bad circuit, it just sits there, stewing, waiting for you to touch the wrong screw. Today, I want to talk about how we keep the lights on without turning ourselves into human fuses.
Good, because my knowledge of electrical work ends at red is bad, black is also bad, and please don't touch the shiny bits. I think most makers are terrified of their breaker box. It's like a high-stakes game of operation where the buzz actually hurts.
It's a healthy fear. If you aren't a little nervous around a 20 amp circuit, you're probably not paying attention. But troubleshooting doesn't have to be a guessing game in the dark. It's more like being a detective. You're looking for the one part of the highway where the bridge washed out.
So, where do we start? When the table saw just stops, or the lights flicker like a horror movie every time the compressor kicks in. What's the first move that doesn't involve calling an expensive professional yet?
You start with the simple stuff, the low-hanging fruit. Half the time, people start tearing into motors when all they did was trip a breaker or pop a fuse. You have to look for the overload. I once spent 3 hours dismantling a drum sander because it kept cutting out, only to realize my apprentice had plugged the space heater into the same circuit. I was ready to throw the whole machine in the scrap heap.
Standard is it plugged in? Logic then. But what if the breaker isn't tripped? What if it's just acting weird?
Then we get into what I call the ghosts in the machine, voltage irregularities. This is the stuff that eats expensive tools. If your voltage is sagging because of a loose connection or a wire that's too thin for the run, your motors are going to run hot and die young. It's like trying to run a marathon through a straw. You need a multimeter, not the $5 one from the bin by the checkout, but a real one.
I've seen you with that thing. You look like you're performing surgery. For the people who aren't tiger levels of obsessed, what are we actually measuring?
We're looking for the flow. You check voltage to see if the pressure is there. You check continuity to see if the path is clear. Think of continuity like a clear tunnel. If your multimeter beeps, the tunnel's open. If it's silent, there's a rock slide somewhere in that wire. That's usually where the fire starts.
Okay, let's talk about the rock slide. Short circuits, ground faults. Those words sound expensive and slightly explosive. How do we find a fault without, becoming the path to ground ourselves?
This is where we talk about the hopscotch method. It's a systematic way of jumping down the line. You start at the power source and jump to the first junction. Got power? Good. Hop to the next switch. Still got power? Keep moving. Eventually, you'll hop onto a spot where the power has vanished. That's your culprit. It's way better than just staring at a mess of wires and hoping for an epiphany.
I like that. Hopscotch for adults with high voltage consequences. But wait, how are you doing this hopping safely? I assume you aren't just poking wires with your bare fingers.
Not since 1994, Alex. No, safety isn't a suggestion. It's the floor you stand on. The golden rule is lockout/tag out. If you're working on a circuit, you don't just flip the switch and hope nobody walks by and flips it back. You put a physical lock on that breaker. You put a tag on it that says, Tiger is working here, don't kill him today.
It sounds a bit dramatic for a home shop, doesn't it?
Not when you're under a machine and your well-meaning spouse decides they need to turn the lights back on in the garage. I've seen it happen. It turns a 10-minute fix into a trip to the emergency room real fast. And keep your hands out of wet spots. I don't care if it's just a little damp. Water and electricity are a match made in a very bad place.
Fair point. So we've got our multimeter, we're locked and tagged, and we're doing the hopscotch. Let's talk about diagrams. Every time I open a manual, the wiring diagram looks like a map of the London Underground drawn by a spider on caffeine.
It's a language, Alex. Once you learn that a circle with a cross is a lamp and a zigzag is a resistor, it starts to tell a story. The diagram is the truth. If the diagram says wire A goes to terminal B and you see wire A hanging out with terminal C, you found your shop mystery solved. I always tell people, don't even pick up a screwdriver until you've stared at the schematic long enough to see it in your sleep.
What about the newer stuff? My modern lathe has a digital readout and more sensors than a Mars rover. Troubleshooting that feels like I need a PhD.
Modern I&E, instrumentation, and electrical is a different beast. You're looking for sensor drift or signal degradation. Sometimes the sensor isn't broken, it's just tired or covered in sawdust. A thermal scanner is a lifesaver here. You point it at a control panel, and the part that's glowing like the sun, that's the part about to fail. It lets you see the fever before the patient dies.
See the fever. I like that. You make it sound like gardening, Tiger, just with more potential for heart palpitations.
It is. You're tending a system. And look, the biggest mistake I see, and I've done this more times than I'll admit, is trying to fix three things at once. You change a fuse, you tighten a screw, and you replace a switch, then you turn it on. It works, but you have no idea which one was the problem. You haven't learned anything. Change one thing, test, change the next. It's slow, it's boring, and it's the only way to actually grow as a maker.
So basically, what you're saying is, don't be a hero, use your brain, and treat every wire like it's a sleeping snake.
Exactly. And know when to walk away. If you open a panel and it looks like a rat's nest of melted insulation and charred plastic, that's not a weekend project. That's a call the guy with the permit situation. There's no shame in recognizing a fight you can't win.
That might be the most useful thing you've ever said. Know when the snake is too big to handle.
At the end of the day, troubleshooting is just about respect. Respect for the power and respect for the process. If you follow the path, use the right tools, and keep your boots dry, you'll find that electricity isn't magic. It's just physics that needs a little guidance.
And maybe a lockout tag with your name on it.
Especially that. If I can leave the listeners with one thing, your eyes and ears are your best diagnostic tools. If a motor sounds like it's grinding coffee beans, or if you smell hot ozone, that weird metallic tang in the air, don't wait for the fire. Stop, think, hopscotch.
Stop, think, hopscotch. I'm putting that on a t-shirt. Thanks for the spark today, Tiger.
Just make sure it's the good kind of spark, Alex. See you in the shop.